Thanks for tuning in to the Retirement Accelerator webinar. My name is Christian Allen, President of Money Insights. Today, with my partners Rod Zabriskie and Ben Lonsdale, we're going to take you through a little-known strategy that we call the Retirement Accelerator. Historically, it's only been available to the ultra-high net worth, so we're super excited to share it with you. We believe it will not only change the way you think about retirement planning altogether, but it's the most powerful, impactful strategy specific to high-income earners that exist in the marketplace. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy.
All right, thanks, Christian. This is Rod Zabriskie. I'll go ahead and kick us off, and then Ben will be joining us here in a minute. First and foremost, let's just talk about who this is for. So it used to be that in the good old days that this was primarily for only the ultra high net worth individuals and families. And in the more recent past, within the last 10, 12 years, there have been programs put in place that make it available to a lot more people. So for anybody who makes a strong six-figure income, this can be a part of your future. And so let's get in and talk about what it looks like. First thing we want to do is just talk through the most important points as it relates to the Retirement Accelerator. So the first thing is that this is an amazing alternative for traditional retirement plans. Now, it's not a 401k, IRA, or any of those types of traditional, what we think of as retirement plans. It's different, but it's a great alternative for that. The mindset behind it is the same, and I think you'll see what we mean as we go through this. Second thing is that it's the best way to maximize retirement income using the fewest dollars possible, and most effective way to create tax-free income in retirement. And these sound like pretty bold statements, but I think you'll agree that by the time we get done with this video that you'll see why of the different pieces that come together that allow us to do this. One of the things is that we're maximizing the effect of leverage. Likely, a lot of you probably are comfortable with leverage as it relates to investing in certain things. This is just a matter of adding retirement income to that mix and just maximizing the effect of leverage toward that. And the last piece is we're not going to spend a lot of time during the video on this, but if you like the concept, it can be amazing when applied to groups. And so if you're a partner in your firm, or you have you feel like that these benefits could be great for a lot of the people in your company, then let's talk about that because it can be amazing as it applies to groups. So next thing we want to do is just jump into this whole concept of leverage. Ben?
Yeah, Rod mentioned really that leverage is not new. We've talked about how maybe people don't want to be in debt or avoid debt, but most people in the world actually dive into leverage all the time to buy their home or real estate. And this same type of leverage is just as conservative. So just like when you buy a house, if you have $100,000, you can take that $100,000 and then using leverage, you're able to actually purchase 4 homes, right? And obviously, when you leverage that $100,000 to get 4 homes that are rental properties, you're getting 4 times the rental income that you could with that $100,000, let alone the increasing value of real estate over time. So leverage is important. It's one of the major values of this strategy, and it's extremely conservative. Banks are happy to lend on this strategy, and so we take advantage of that.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think a lot of us have heard the concept of using other people's money, right, to the extent possible. I may have skin in the game, but if I can use some of someone else's money, in this case the banks, to accomplish the same thing, then I'm much better off. I can do much more with it. And just to re-emphasize that, in this case, what this wheelbarrow of money represents is the money that I'm setting aside for retirement. So it's something I'm going to do anyway. And if instead of just having, at the end of the day, the wheelbarrow, if I can also have the dump truck, the bank pulling up and with their dump truck full of cash and adding to that, then why wouldn't I choose to do that?
Yeah.
And we'll get back into this a little more in a little bit. What we want to do is hit on the actual vehicle that we're using.
Yeah. So the vehicle is actually indexed universal life. So we're structuring this very carefully, and this is different life insurance that you've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's a great point. A lot of you may be listening to this and thinking, oh, wow, I had no idea that we were getting into a conversation about life insurance, and the context may be just completely out of place for you. Well, keep listening, then we'll show you the reasons why using life insurance, specifically designed the way that we do, like Ben said, very carefully designed to minimize the cost, maximize the growth toward this whole goal of creating future income in retirement. And so if you've heard the gurus talk about it, just hold on and we'll help you understand why this is very different than what you typically would hear about but from the gurus.
Yeah. So let's talk about the points that really make it different. First, this indexed universal life account, it uses market indexes like the S&P 500 as a measuring stick for the growth within the policy. So the account in this policy is able to, on average, historically, capture 80% of the ups in the market while not participating in the downs of the market. And so it's a nice way for us to create more security and then also be able to capture that growth in the market. The second thing is that this growth is all tax-free. So when you compare that to any traditional market, that growth being tax-free adds an additional, layer of value, since you're not having to pay taxes on that. You're actually able to enjoy quite a bit of security because you're not worrying about what the tax rates are doing in the future when it's time to retire. The third point is, by design, like Rod mentioned, these are different life insurance policies. They are designed to maximize growth and minimize cost. So they're designed specifically for this strategy. So we're not, this is not your vanilla life insurance. This is life insurance that has been used by the very wealthy because they understand the power of it. Another point is it's also creditor protected. So it protects you, the assets in this account is protected from lawsuits and other liabilities. And then the last point is it is life insurance. So you do have a death benefit. We can work with that death benefit to have a legacy aspect for your family and then also for estate planning.
Let's jump in and look at the numbers. So in this example, we're looking at an individual who is going to contribute $50,000 a year for 5 years into the policy. Now, during those first 5 years at the same time, we're getting a loan from the bank to cover an additional $40,000 per year. So a total of about $90,000 per year. Now, when we get to year 6, the individual, she's no longer putting any money into it. 100% of what's going into the policy is now coming through the bank financing. And so by the time we're done, at the end of the 10 years, we're done funding the policy. $250,000 has come out of pocket. The other $646,000 has come from the bank. And so about $900,000 total into the policy. 70 to 75% of it is financed. And when we fast forward to year 15, that's when we're going to take from the policy and actually pay off the bank loan. And from that point forward, we have access to it. In the example we're looking at here, we're going to fast forward to age 65 and start to take an income. And based on these numbers, we're going to be able to produce $110,000 of income per year from age 65. In this example, we're saying until 90. In fact, it could continue beyond age 90. So 250 went in and generates a total of tax-free income, $2.86 million.
Yeah, that's impressive.
So now that we've talked through a basic scenario, let's hit on some of the risks. So number one, because we're using a lot of leverage in the strategy, interest rates matter. And so risk number one is that we run into a period of high interest rates. The second risk is poor market performance. Obviously, if our policy is based on a market index like the S&P 500, then if there is not just a year where the market's not doing well, but an extended period of time. So volatility can be our friend, because since we don't participate in the downs, a market could drop, like in a 2008, dropped substantially, but then we had several years in a row after that where it was up, right? Those kinds of scenarios actually can work in our favor. Here, what I'm talking about in terms of the risk factor is, what if there's an extended period of time, like the Great Depression, where the market isn't performing? Okay, so having identified the risks, let's talk about what we call stress testing. So what we want to do is understand what this plan looks like inside of the worst economic situations as it relates to those risks. So in other words, the first thing we're going to do is look at the high interest rates of the 1980s so we can understand what the plan looks like and how it performs in a situation where not just higher interest rates, but extremely high interest rates, where people were paying as much as 15, 18% on their mortgages. As you may recall, our baseline income was $110,000. If instead we had started this account in the late 70s, just before this run-up of interest rates, then instead of $110,000 a year, we'd be looking at $88,000 a year of income. Still pretty strong, right? So does it have an impact? Absolutely. But even in an extreme situation, 88. Now the second part we're going to look at is the poor market performance. We're going to go back to the Great Depression and say, okay, what would that have looked like if we had started this account in 1929, just before the big drop, and ride it out and then start to project the income in the future. And instead of the 110 in this case, we would have had about $66,000 a year of income from 65 to 90. And so here again, if we're coming out of the Great Depression, if I can produce the 66,000, I'm actually feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's get back to the strategy itself and talk through really what I feel like is the major catalyst to how we can turn a relatively small number of dollars going in into a much larger number coming out on the back end. And part of that is time, compounding, principles that I think we're already familiar with. But the leverage piece of it really makes a big difference. And let's talk about how. Number one, we start out with using the leverage through the bank. And when we talk about that $110,000 of income, we're using a conservative spread. What I mean by that is that when I'm comparing the interest that I'm earning inside of my account versus the interest that's accruing on the loan, then obviously I want to earn more than what I'm paying, right? So that's the spread. And historically speaking, in any 15-year time frame, we never would have earned less than a 2% spread. And so that's what we're going to use. We're going to say, what if it was 2% on the spread? And then we're going to, even when we get to this point where we're paying off the bank, we're actually going to do it using a policy loan. So we continue to use leverage. Now, instead of having this external loan that's the bank, we've moved that inside of our policy. And as you may be familiar with, if you're familiar with our investment optimizer strategy, when I take a loan against my policy, my full cash value stays in the account and continues to grow, even though I may have a loan against it. So let's look at some specific numbers to understand really the power behind this. So we're going to look at three specific numbers. And this is, in our hypothetical example we looked at a minute ago, when we fast forward to the moment right after we've paid off that bank loan, then the total cash value in that account is $1.5 million. We paid off the loan using a policy loan. Now we have a $900,000 loan balance in our policy, which means that we have a $600,000 net cash value, or our net equity, in the account. Now, let's just assume, for example purposes, that the next year the market index went up 10%. Okay? So the question is, where do I calculate off? How do I know how much interest I'm going to earn? Well, I'm going to earn it off of that total cash value, that $1.5 million number. So in this example, 10% means $150,000 of growth. Now, I'm also going to be accruing interest on my loan. And so if I assume a 5% loan rate on that, then my loan balance would have gone up by $45,000 at the same time. So the net growth in that year would be $105,000. Well, if I go back and calculate and say, okay, well, my net growth is 105, what is that as a percentage of 600,000? My net cash value, 17.5%. So in other words, because of the leverage that we have inside the policy, and because that interest growth is calculated off of the total cash value, in a year where the market came back at 10%, my net equity in the account actually grew by 17.5%. And so that's the power of having the leverage, not just while we have the bank, but then when we pay off the bank, continuing to carry that through inside the policy. And the net result of that, when we fast forward and we say, okay, I took the income to age 90, there was a death benefit that paid out. In the end, we're generating about the tax equivalent of an 18% compounded return over a long period of time. And that's powerful. Okay, so having gone through it, let's just touch on our key takeaways. So number one, great alternative to traditional retirement accounts. We have a lot of people who, from a tax standpoint, see the value of paying the tax today, putting it in something like this, seeing it grow, and creating this future tax-free retirement. So from a tax standpoint, it's kind of like a Roth, but at the same time, using the leverage and having the guardrails on the way the policy works so that we don't have to participate in all these downs of the market. Another big piece that Ben hit on is the creditor protection. A lot of the people that we're working with are high income, and one of the things that they just face is the target on their back from potential liability and lawsuits, and so that creditor protection can be a huge deal. And then the fifth point, the estate planning. So we've been talking about this specific about creating an income, and it's amazing for that. It also will generate this death benefit. And if someone were to take less income or defer income or ultimately end up deciding, hey, I have good income from other sources, I don't necessarily need to take it from here, then to the extent that you don't take that income, it's going to be a much larger death benefit, tax-free death benefit that passes on to your heirs. And so from an estate planning standpoint, liquidity at that point of passing the estate to the next generation can be powerful as well. So thanks for joining us for the video Retirement Accelerator. Be happy to visit with anybody who'd be interested in learning more. Click on the button here by the video, and we're happy to set up a call to visit with you. Take care.
Thanks.